So that, my friends, has been Dragon Age the Veilguard, and I have some thoughts. um, it is the first Dragon Age game I've played. I've heard that Origins is one of the more well-respected ones. Inquisition's kind of up in the air. Dragon Age 1 and 2 kind of up in the air. I do intend at some point to visit some of those. I've never played any of them. So coming into the game, I didn't have any preconceived notions about what I was encountering here. And I gotta say, it's how can I put this? It feels less like a RPG than it does just an adventure game, honestly. It definitely has RPG elements in it. There's a skill tree. There's a couple skill trees. There's, some so there's XP gained, and there's lore abound, and different equipment and whatnot. But the way that they've set up the equipment, the way they've done the moment-to-moment gameplay, it really doesn't feel like a RPG to my sensibilities. It just feels more like like I said, an adventure game where it's just like, because none of the equipment seems to really matter all that much. None of the skills are really that awesome or great. And granted, I was playing on easy mode. I was doing that mostly because I heard, and this seems to hold up, that the harder modes were not very challenging. They were just more annoying than challenging. In other words, all they really did was make everything into bullet sponges, which is not really, it really isn't fun. And given what I've played through as far as the easy mode is concerned, I could see where that would be a real issue. Like, they loved having boss encounters where it was the 1/3 rule, right? It was like, you get them down to 1/3 of their life, they go off, and then you have to sit there and wait while they spawn some ads for like 2 or 3 minutes, and then they come back, and then you get them another third of the way down, then they go off the battlefield where you can't, they're invulnerable, and then you have to wait again. And it's just like, I could see how their idea of difficulty was just making you just impatient and annoyed. And that's kind of not, I've seen that a lot in the newer games, and I wish we would get back to the older style of just actually spending some time on making encounters difficult but fair, and making them fun. Here's the thing. Again, this is my first Dragon Age game, but if I look at D&D, for instance, Dungeons and Dragons, right? Anyone thinking about Dungeons and Dragons would think, oh yeah, there's probably going to be a lot of dungeons in there, and there are, but D&D really holds back on the dragons part of it. You don't really see dragons that often. When you do, they're really unique and they're really difficult, right? And that's good, because it means that they have to rely on, they have to use them sparingly, and they have to make them meaningful, make those encounters meaningful. In Dragon Age here, it's like every other, literally 90% of the boss encounters were some form of dragon. And what's worse about that is it was a copy-paste dragon. Like, literally every dragon had the same moveset. There was occasionally one that would throw a little wrench in the works, but up to that point, they were always doing the same moveset. Breathe fire, you go up and hit them in the legs, and then they turn red, and you gotta dodge while they kick their legs, and it's just over and over and over again. It was just different colors. They basically just reskin the same dragon thing over and over and over again. and all the encounters were, and they were all 1/3 encounters. So you get a one down to 66% life, and then they go off for 2 minutes, and then another 33% life, and they go off for 2 minutes, and it's just like it got to be very one note and very ponderous as far as those encounters go. The combat itself was, it felt very it didn't flow very well. It felt kind of stilted. There is no, in theory you could be a range character, but in practice it was so annoying to use the bow that you ended up just having to be a melee character. You probably could have been a mage-like character too, maybe, but again, you're not going to be a mage from range. You're going to be up in the face of the enemy, and it's just like, that doesn't feel right. It feels like there was just one way to play the game, and that was it. And sword and board was pretty much the way to go. And beyond that, though, the art is beautiful. It's a very beautiful game. The gameplay was passable. It was not fantastic. It was not great. It wore its welcome out pretty quickly. The quests were strange. Like, we're used to certain types of quests in RPGs. A lot of the quests in this game were what I would consider to be story beats, right? Like, you literally go off and talk to somebody, and then that's it. There was no combat. There was no, like, fetch something or anything like that. It was just literally just talk to somebody, and then it's done. It just dropped you off. It's like, all right, well, go pick something else from your journal. It's like, that gets kind of weird after a while. I mean, I get it from a story perspective, but the problem is, and we'll get to this in a second, the story sucks through and through. It just is terrible. But you know, so some of that felt weird. The traversal of the world was in many ways annoying because it's not open world in any stretch of imagination. It's very linear. It's very corridor based. And so you revisit areas way too often, like just constantly revisiting areas. Some of the puzzles are interesting, but a lot of them are just annoy you because you can see on your map that there's a chest there, but you can't unlock that area. Like, the area isn't unlockable. It's just something that happens if you do a bunch of side quests, and then suddenly the area is available to you. And it's just kind of, it ends up annoying you more than being intuitive, because you see that thing on your map, you can't collect it, and you don't know why you can't collect it. And then eventually it comes around to it. So it just kind of, it throws you off quite a bit. There's also, and I'm not the only one that's experienced this, I looked on forums, I looked on the Steam forums and everything else. The audio in this game blows itself out very quickly. It pops, and it makes just, it's just crackly and terrible, and then it's fine. And then it's crackly and terrible, and then it's fine, and then it's crackly and terrible. I don't know why it's doing that. This is the only game I've owned on this computer that has ever done that. I'm not the only one experiencing it. To date, they have not fixed it. They have not even acknowledged that it's a bug, which tells me they have no idea why it's happening, or don't believe that it's happening. And it's pretty terrible, because it's like a combination of things. It's not only is it audio popping and blowing out, but the voiceovers actually slow down. So it's like, it's almost like it's not only is it popping and crackling, but it's also playing their voices at like maybe 90% speed. So they kind of slow down. They kind of sound like, "Roar, just we're going on to this other, it's terrible. And I'm honestly surprised with all the work that looks like they've put into this, that they would just not do anything about that audio, and that they would have this audio problem and not realize that they have it. Technologically, we got to talk about some shader things here. This is the only game to date where you start up the game and you have to sit there for 2 minutes every time you start up the game while it validates shaders. And God help you if it decides that it needs to recompile its shaders, because you're going to be sitting there for 10 minutes while it does it. That is unacceptable and terrible and a big failure. Being a developer myself, being a coder myself, like, that's a failure through and through to do that, especially given that no other game out there right now has that same problem. So, that's just bad, quality of life through and through. Terrible. So let's get to the story, because this is the big thing that has pissed me off the most about this game. Not really pissed me off, but has disappointed me the most about this game. As I was initially going through the game, the dialogue itself felt to me like the dialogue you would hear in like an after-school special, or, a very special episode of like a sitcom from back in the day, or something like that. It felt very preachy. It felt very dumbed down, and very just amateurish. It wasn't until I got towards the end of the second act, when all the companion storylines started wrapping up in their own side quests, that I realized what I think is the big problem with the story. And that is, I think, and I don't have, it feels like, is what I should say. This feels like they went on to some Dragon Age fan fiction forums, and they gathered up a whole bunch of short stories that fans had submitted, and just kind of shoved them all together and maybe tweaked them a little bit, tweaked some of the names and stuff, and then just kind of ran with it. Because that's what it reads like. It reads like fan fiction. It reads like not good fan fiction, bad fan fiction. Like the type of fan fiction where it's like, shipping and stuff, where it's like you go out, you set out to have one thing happen. You want Commander Shepard and Garius Volkaren to get it on, and you work backwards from there. Everything else is just flavor text, right? It's like, we got to put them in a situation that causes them to get their freak on, right? And that's exactly what this reads and feels like throughout the game, is that all they wanted to do was have some endpoint in mind, some message, and then everything else just kind of, they didn't want to spend the time to build up the characters to make that message impactful. They just kind of wanted to get to the message as quickly and as efficiently as they could. And that is, I think that sort of wraps up tightly what I feel about the story, is that they have these character endings and these endpoints that they get to, but they don't earn them, right? They don't do the setup. They don't do the narrative building to make it happen. And they actually out themselves that this is true, because one of the things it does, anyone who's familiar with a Telltale game, about the little message whenever you would go through a Telltale game and be like, this character will remember that, well, Dragon Age does it the worst way possible. it will actually pop up a little message on the side when you select an option and tell you why a character is talking the way they are, right? And I don't want to give any spoilers out, but basically it's saying they understood. I think someone went, on a final pass of the game and went, you know what? None of our players are going to understand why this character is talking this way or behaving this way. So, because we didn't earn that, we didn't make it very clear in our writing why they're doing this, or why, this option is available because the character chose something earlier, or you chose some dialogue earlier, but we didn't make it obvious enough. Like, we didn't earn this end game, right? So we got to tell you exactly why this happened, because it's not, you would never understand otherwise. And it's true. It's true. A lot of these characters end up acting in ways that are completely nonsensical. And then that little text will pop up and go, oh, so they're saying that because I chose something 10 hours ago that seems completely unrelated and there was no build up to it. Okay. And that's the most damning thing for the story of this game, is that they literally had to call out things that they couldn't write because they weren't talented enough to write them. And it's just insane. Absolutely insane. And the main story was stretched out, and the dialogue was repetitive, so repetitive. I can't tell you how many times they're like, we need to kill this character, kill that character, we need to kill this big bad, we need to kill this big bad. It's like, I know. You've said it for the 90th time. I know. It's like just repeatedly saying the same things over and over and over again. And it's just the dialogue options, most of them suffer from sort of they suffer from modernization, right? Where it's like you pick something that you think sounds one way, they end up saying something completely different, and it doesn't matter anyway, because the next option you pick, the character you're talking to will just repeat everything you just said already, because none of the options build upon one another, except where they do. And then it doesn't make any sense that they do. It's crazy. It'll drive you absolutely nutty and insane. And yeah, like I said, it reads like bad fan fiction. Bad shipping fan fiction is what it reads like. And that kind of sucks, because an RPG lives and dies on its story, it really does. And I think that kind of is the other nail in the coffin as to why I hesitate to call this an RPG. And I call it more of an adventure game than anything else, because it did not earn being called an RPG based on the hours I've put into it. So that's where we're at. My friends. Would I recommend Dragon Age: The Veilguard? No, I wouldn't. There's far too many failures in this game that if you want story, you're not going to get story. If you want action combat, it's barely that. If you like to be frustrated and have characters that say nonsensical things over and over again, maybe it's your game. I don't know. If you want to have audio issues that no other game has, if you want to sit for 20 minutes while it validates shaders every time you start it up, then maybe you want this game. I don't know. I cannot recommend. I just can't, based on what I've played. on finishing the game and everything else. So that's where we're at. Oh, one other thing about the story, and I found this out after I'd already made the decision. I looked at a walkthrough the other day. Towards the end, they pull like a Mass Effect 2 thing where it's like, you gotta choose characters to go off on, side quests during the end quests, and you make sure you gotta make sure you pick the right character, or they might get killed, or they might not succeed correctly. And I found out that one of the characters, we'll just call it out. So there was one section where you could choose between Nev or Balara to dispel a ward, and those were the only two choices you've had. Dispel a magical ward, right? So you would think, since the game gave you those two choices, that those two characters would be really good at dispelling wards. And you'd be 50% right, because later on, you're given another choice where, one of those characters is no longer available, and you're given another choice that says, like, we need someone to stay by and dispel a magical ward. And so you think, well, the game said that Nev is good at dispelling a magical ward earlier, so I'll choose Nev for this. And you would be wrong. Because apparently, you're supposed to choose Emmerich, who, up to that point, has never dispelled a magical ward in the entire game. He's a necromancer, right? He works with the dead. Why would he be dispelling magical wards when you've got two other characters who have previously dispelled magical wards? And neither of those were the correct answer. I don't know. But that just shows you the inconsistencies and the madness that is the story, if you call it that, of this game. So that is where we stand, my friends. So that is it for me for Dragon Age Veilguard. Thank you for my thoughts on it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next thoughts video.